All right, everybody, who's ready for the Q&A? Let's do a quick sound off and or chat off.
Hello.
I am, and hopefully it works now.
I'm excited.
Ready to listen?
Excellent. Just gonna grab one more thing here quick. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna get this started. I want to keep it quick and a little bit tighter than last time, and I think everybody will be on board with that. Pretty lightweight agenda for this time around. Basically, I want to talk about the PTR, kind of that idea, that concept a little bit, and get a little bit of feedback from everyone on what they thought about it. You know, any ideas for improvement, things like that. Talk a little bit about blue-green and kind of what my goals were or are with this update and why I want to make that happen, and then go over basically my proposed changes and break it down, review, get some feedback quick, talk a little bit about the cards that aren't going to make it, or I'm not looking to make it, one of the hardest changes that I'm looking at, and then basically last call, anything you guys want to talk about. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Really quiet, yeah, from Fizzled. Okay, cool. So, just starting off with the PTR, basically my goal was to take the changes that I felt would be the biggest changes, be the most contentious, require, the most discussion and kind of thought, and get them out there sooner for feedback. Basically exactly how I laid out in the Patreon post, basically saying, look, I'm trying to develop this. Here's what we're looking at. Let's take a look at this before we're committed, before we're all in and laying these out, making everybody buy cards or sending cards out or anything like that. And basically, I thought it was really successful. My goals were to get feedback, to lay out some of the potential changes, and to turn it over and get that feedback particularly from patrons, but anybody that wanted to offer feedback on what was going on. And so pretty clearly, it was great to get some feedback on Senate Griffin and Court Hussar, to get some feedback on the blue-green cards like Shamble Shark, which some people talk about, other people kind of talk down to, and basically kind of lay out like, here's the art of the possible, and you guys came through awesome. Like, I cannot thank you all enough. If you read it, gave feedback, if you participated in the discussions, if it made you think about other feedback to offer. But I just wanted to quick check and see if this was something that you really enjoyed and liked and thought was helpful. And if you had any questions or feedback around the PTR that we didn't get a chance to kind of hit on. I see somebody typing, and everybody muted up, so it's a good sign. Oh, you can't hear me.
We can hear you, so it's probably just his sound.
Oh, okay.
Conceptually, I enjoyed it, but all of my drafting was just me on computer making notes. So I don't know if it was as helpful as it could have.
Yeah, I mean, I think doing a dry run and seeing what cards you would have instead or what cards you would want was helpful. It's difficult to say, without tons of iterations and a team dedicated to testing, to say one change or another is absolutely correct. But if we can get just a little bit better directionally, which I think we are, or at least I am, after getting that first pass of updates out there to think about, it worked out well for me. So, your drafts and the discussions those inspired were good and helpful. Even if they weren't perfect in the sense of testing. Really focused on green ramp, and second, drafting tutor. Really liked it overall. Awesome. Yeah, so I'm not going to dwell on this. It sounds like people liked it. Everyone was okay with it. If you've got more feedback, I think everyone's okay yelling at me on on Discord. So I think that works out fine. So I want to go over quick the changes that I'm proposing. And so this is a little bit different. I'm not going to review every card or every potential card or every good common and evaluate it. We've had a lot of time to look at the set. It's released. It's live in the world. Pre-releases, it's in standard. Everything's fine. Arena has accelerated the ability to play with new cards. So we don't need to dwell on the art of the possible. Many of us have had a chance to either play with them themselves or talk to people who have played with them. So I'm going to talk straight up about the update. And instead of bouncing around and having a blind voting system and a blind, let's go ahead and get different scoring mechanisms, I've actually streamlined it this time. So I'm going to talk about the change, put up the new card, and we can kind of vote on whether we like this card or not. And it's meant to be lightweight and fun. Nothing serious here. But the first change that I'm pretty much locked into is... if I can actually type and type right at the same time, is skittering crustacean. There it goes. And so under emojis, the little reactions, I actually added the 1 through 5 mana emojis. So you can actually just vote that way. So if you really don't like it, you can put a 1 up and maybe comment on why. If you do like it, you can put a 5 or a 3. Basically the same 1 to 5 scoring system for how much we like this card or not. But basically the philosophy is pretty straightforward. Making blue-green better. Giving it that identity isn't just blue-green cards, but cards that exist in the blue and green sections that are serviceable for that deck as well as others. So a 2-3-4-3 is not super exciting. It's a pretty good backstop. It stops bears, it stops 1/1 tokens. But the monstrosity, the ability to become a massive 6/7 hexproof monster is a really great payoff for a ramp deck. And so pretty straightforward. You can curve out. You've got an early creature. You have a payoff later. You can pay it at instant speed. Monstrosity hits that sweet spot that a ramp deck likes. And I think that while Monstrosity in red hasn't been so great in a control deck, it's awesome. There's the Conspiracy Rats that are bear that turn into bigger with Menace. I'm forgetting the name of it. Somebody will put it in chat, I'm sure. And this Skittering Crustacean just slots in over Rishadan Airship. So entirely replaceable, not very defensive flyer that's pretty redundant and outclassed by a lot of the other flyers in the cube. Now is a pretty serviceable early blocker that's probably going to end up in a blue deck that wants to go long, which is the sweet spot for a card like that. Anything additional anyone wants to share before moving on? Got people typing. Yeah, blue-green was a lot of fun to play with because I hadn't really looked at it in a while, and I had a lot of fun thinking about the kinds of decks and play sequences that would be great. Because what do you do on turns 2 through 4, and what do you do on turns 5 through 8? It's a story with the ramp deck. And building that story out and looking at redundancy for that is great. Yeah, Sinuous Vermin. Yeah, what a great card for black-based control decks. Like, cool, I can, I get a 5/5 Menace, to beat down with once I've got Pestilence up. Oh, and by the way, Pestilence plus a 5/5 is also pretty good. So Monstrosity has its place since it's instant speed. And we'll talk about Adapt a little bit later, obviously in the blue-green section. But that was something that stood out, was just there weren't great adapt creatures in mono blue. So Skittering Crustacean is definitely the strongest. Yeah, Mana Sink, fizzled like it as a Mana Sink. Feel bad on kicker cards that you can't kick. Yeah, the Cycling Serpent feels for blue decks with Gravediggers. Yep. Yeah, turn 1 you get to do something, and then turn 4 you get to get it back, and then turn 7 you get the payoff for putting it in your deck. Again, it goes to that play sequence of how many things can I do early so there's mana parity. That's one thing to keep in mind, is the aggro decks get the best mana advantages early in the game and the worst in the late, and it's flipped for the ramp decks, but you still need some. And that's where, little 3-drops, things like Growth Spiral, spoiler alert, kind of get to fit in and give you mana to do. The next card I want to talk about is Blade Juggler. To the surprise of no one, Phyrexian Phyrexian Rager 2.0, I guess fair Phyrexian Ragers looks pretty solid. I've seen everybody basically jam it in draft decks and sealed decks. It's a nice kind of mana smoother. It's the kind of card that if you're an aggressive deck, you get to curve out with it. You get a 3/2 for 3 mana, which is totally great rate. If you're not curving out with it, a control deck's totally happy paying 5 mana, getting something that trades pretty well and replaces itself. The one life is pretty marginal. It's definitely adds up against an aggro deck. You don't want to try to be stabilizing by playing this on 5 when you're at 5 life or anything. But it does good work. Mardu Skullhunter is the kind of card that it's replacing. I'm not big on discard effects in the cube just because there's so much attrition and so much gameplay to be made around resource management that I like that. It's really easy. It was really easy to get basically just a game over on turn 4 by failing to block something and Okiba Gang Shinobiing someone. They just couldn't recover. They would just lose what they were going to use to try to keep up with you. So something that works as a 5-drop, but also works as a 3-drop when you can aggro into Spectacle. It's that kind of card that in black goes into the slower controller decks and goes into the faster aggressive decks. In red black, when you turn 2 with 2 tokens and you attack in, okay, maybe you trade 1 token, they take 1 damage, and now you have a 3/2 that's replaced itself, and you continue that pressure. Red black decks especially are kind of the best place for the sacrifice payoffs, the best place for the resource trading. Like, I'm going to trade my creatures for your creatures, but I'm going to come out ahead. I'm going to trade my life for your life, but come out ahead. It's that racing kind of deck that you can do in red black. And of course in black green, when you have a trampler trample in, or somebody doesn't want to block a 1/1 Death Toucher, again, it's not that hard in a creature centric deck or creature centric cube like this one to turn on Spectacle. That's kind of my take on it, and nobody seemed to really have a strong opinion on it against it, but everyone's really excited for it, and I think it's going to be fine. Anybody have some thoughts to add to that? Yeah, chips in with flyer, blue black. Yeah, I'll attack you for 2 in the air. Okay, shrug. Oh, now for 3 mana, I've drawn a card and put another body down. Yeah, it's such a flexible kind of thing with Spectacle. It plays way better than it looks. Yeah. 5 mana doesn't feel bad. Yeah, so I've been thinking about that because we haven't played Kavu Climber and Rock's Oracle, which are 5 mana, enter the battlefield, just draw a card with no downside in green. But I think that what green wants to do at 5 mana is a little bit different, and I'm not sure that making a 3/3 and drawing a card, basically that's a totally fair rate. You can make a 3/3 for 3 in green. You can draw a card for 2 colorless. That's your go-to baseline cantrip cost, right? You have an effect, add 2 mana, that's draw a card. It's the cost for cycling. So the advantage on a black card is the upside of all the Spectacle, but you don't mind paying it because it's such a good effect in black where you have higher removal density. You're playing a longer game. It definitely works. Yeah, just the Spectacle on it makes it so much better. And once your opponent puts you on Blade Juggler, now they've got additional choices to make, right? Do I block it and give him, do I block and make its trade here, or do I give him the potential to get Blade Juggler for 3 mana? It's not as marginal as it looks because 3 power is so much bigger than 2. Phyrexian Rager is good. Blade Juggler at 3 is just way better. All right, we're gonna move on to the next card, which is my favorite red card in the set, Burning Tree Vandal. Keldon Overseer is was a 3/1 with haste, and you could kick it to get a threaten for 4 mana. So 7 mana, make a 3/1 haste and threaten you. So if you're playing rampy, if you're getting big, fine. Yeah, it can give you a big turn, but curving out, playing it just as a 3/1 with haste was pretty marginal. There's a lot of tokens in the cube. That 1 toughness is a big liability, and getting the chance to kick it was pretty rare. In this case, we have the Riot, which lets you haste with it, so you can leverage, attack in, get the card filtering, keep up the pressure in an aggressive red deck. But you also have the option of making it a 3/2 and making it much sturdier, especially if you're say blue-red. You've got bounce spells, you've got ways of controlling the board, slowing down your opponent, creating openings to attack with. That's what I look for in monocolored cards, is which archetypes is this going to fit into well. And the use case for Burning Tree Vandal, where Riot gives you the flexibility to make it a little bit slower and sturdier or a little bit faster and aggressive, just is the flexibility I'm looking for. Also, it's a repeatable source of card filtering in red. And it's really important to repeat that. It's repeatable. It's not a one-time trigger. It's not enter the battlefield. It keeps hitting. And unlike, say, Looter Il Core, which I'm going to go ahead and throw in here just so we can read it, people ask me, like, well, why not put in Looter Il Core? Well, one, blue's not an aggressive color. So it's basically, a merfolk looter that also hits the opponent for 1. Pretty big game. But more importantly, Looter Il Core leads to weird gameplay situations where you're a blue control deck, but you're kind of happy to pick up a piece of equipment. And having I've been beaten to death by a 3/3 Looter Il Core, where my removal spell gets counterspelled. I can bounce it maybe or kill it. They get it back in blue-black. Like it's a very powerful card, and it led to just gameplay that wasn't as fun as more conditional card drawing. That's kind of why the 1/3 where you cast something, you cast a non-creature spell and you get to loot, feels good, because at end step you can use your removal spell and then card filter. It rewards a play sequence that encourages you to do what you want to do with a defensive creature. But Looter Il Core is just pure value. It's a mole drifter that's way better at killing your opponent. And that was not why it's there. But Burning Tree Vandal doesn't kill your opponent right away. It's a very fair card. It's a lot of fun. Did anybody get a chance to play with Burning Tree Vandal? I think it's okay in sealed. I think it's got a really good home in draft from what I can tell. But I'm just actually looking for anybody who got to play with it, because I didn't get a chance to go to a pre-release or release event to play with it.
I did have it in one of my sealed decks at the pre-release, and I mean it did some work, but for Gruul it's a little too small to actually do the big stuff. But I mean, rummaging for cards is always a good option.
Prioritize killing it wherever possible. Yeah, that risk of giving your opponent card advantage is such a decision point for the opponent. And even if you don't need to rummage with it, I like the idea that it makes your opponent have to think about blocks, which is something that makes, I think, combat more engaging, right? Should I block this creature or not? That's a good question to ask, and the more often we ask that, I think the more engaging the combat is. Are you about getting traded for Savannah Lions? Yeah, and maybe that's what it does. It gets traded for for a small creature. We'll see how it plays out. I think it'll be better in like the tempo decks. In the all-in red decks that have enough burn spells to keep the path clear. I imagine burning the opponent's creature out, attacking, looting away a mountain, drawing another burn spell. I feel like that's a pretty strong sequence that's possible in some of the decks. The next card is one that I actually wasn't thinking about, and I'm a little uncomfortable about, because it's going to make me make a decision I've been hoping I really don't have to make, but it's Skewer the Critics. Skewer the Critics is, sorcery lightning bolt spectacle. Otherwise, it's just really bad open fire, which is the same mana cost, but an instant to deal 3 damage to any target. Skewer the Critics and Barb Lightning was kind of the card that it was looking to replace. I like Barb Lightning. I always kind of read it as a 2-for-1, but it's basically 5 mana, kill something small, deal lightning bolt of damage. It's actually not as efficient as it once was, respectively. For the 2-for-1s that are available, and the card advantage that you can find in kind of other colors and multicolor cards. 5 mana is a big ask for a lot of the burn decks. You know, they're much happier spending 1 mana or 2 mana. Searing Blaze exists and does the same thing. Thanks for putting that in. You know, it's totally a fine kind of card. You know, losing a game to Lightning Bolt Skewer seems like a rough loss. Yeah, I'm a little worried about too much burn. And also what I'm worried about is basically Skewer the Critics is, you know, it's basically heralded as a new modern staple. You know, modern burn decks will play it. It's a great kind of card for, you know, for flashback. You know, you can deal a little damage, give a flashback, spectacle it out of the graveyard for 1 mana. You know, if you're main phasing, doing some closing out the game with you know, Jeskai control, things like that. You know, again, I'm not a modern player, so if that play sequence sounds awful, great. That's why I don't play modern. But the idea that you just get an additional Lightning Bolt level efficient burn spell puts this card as a really expensive foil. And as much as I want to give everybody everything, you know, when the foil is the cost of all of the other, more than the cost of all the other foil cards in an update combined, it's going to make it's going to make it basically impossible to fulfill the rewards, which is something I'm a little nervous about. But at the same time, I recognize Skewer the Critics is a great card, and I don't want to discourage adding it to the cube just because it happens to be expensive. The cube is not the cheapest card cube. It's the Pauper card. It's just commons. So you know, I think Barbed Lightning's time has come. I think Skewer the Critic is really good, and it's going to be a permanent addition. You know, if people have played with it, I'm kind of looking for a little bit more feedback, but you know, the idea of adding another, you know, sorcery speed, highly conditional Lightning Bolt to the cube, I think is a balanced enough power level that it's fine. You know, maybe add it and I find out it's not, but I think it's going to be one of those legacy kind of cards where it just gets to hang out and be there for a long time. I see Fizzled and Running Monkeys typing. Does anybody have any thoughts that they want to share around that? Your preference is to facilitate burn that incentivizes using it to clear space for attackers, right? I think for aggressive decks, if you feel like it's appropriate to use it to kill a creature and keep attacking, I think that's a good thing. If you think that you just need to set up a sequence where you're nining an opponent in one turn with burn spell, spectacle, burn spell, I think that aiming for that combo sequence is a little less exciting, but it's something you could totally do in like a blue-red tempo deck, right? Like it's not that play sequence shouldn't be able to happen. It's just that you should feel good using a burn spell to kill a creature with 2. That's kind of the direction I wanted to go. Like it's not a total, it's not a loss to use it on a creature, I think is the best way to put it. It can feel a lot like Riftbolt. Yeah, and I think Riftbolt's a great card. Like, you see it coming. You know, oh, this is a weird attack. Why would they be willing to trade away a token? Oh, you know, and I think that's okay. Seeing a little bit of a telegraph on a burn spell, I think, helps mitigate the power that additional reach or the efficiency of that reach can provide. You know, just 3 damage that you can't possibly block out of anything other than maybe a blue deck adds up when you have enough of them in a deck. When you have enough of them coming your way. Does that make sense to everyone? Or did I just go totally off the rails with that? Rick Rocks is typing.
I follow. I like the idea of Skewer. My question was actually because I thought maybe it was a year and a half ago, cut a few of the burn spells in favor of things that put the focus back on creature combat, which is where I've enjoyed taking Barbed Lightning to remove a blocker or to soften up a blocker for one of my tramplers.
Yeah, and I think the fact that basically, you know, the base mode is the same, right? Both of them are 3 damage for 3 mana, right? Do I have that wrong? Somebody post Barbed Lightning. I feel like I'm off the farm here. Yeah, Barb Lightning is 3 mana for 3 damage. The Atwine is 2. So in our case here, if you're using it to just soften up a creature and basically use it as a falter, right? Like, hey, they've got a 4 toughness, so I'm going to hit it for 3 and basically make them choose, do they want to lose this creature or not? And attack in with my 4/4 Trampler. That sequence still exists in almost exactly the same way with Skewer the Critics. The big difference is Barb Lightning is an instant. It's basically open fire plus, but the upside for Skewer the Critics is you now get a post-combat Lightning Bolt to play around with. So it gives aggro decks a little bit more mana efficiency, which I think that they could use in the mid game. Right, when they're at 4 mana, 5 mana, the opponent's playing 5/5s. An extra Lightning Bolt that's conditional after you lose a creature, is still pretty good. How many pingers does Red still have? It has 1. It has Volshock Shaman. What is it called? 2 and Fireslinger. Thank you, Fizzled. And you guys know my cube better than I do. Yeah, there's Fireslinger and I believe the Volshock Sorcerer, not Shaman Sorcerer. So both one is 2 mana for pinging and it hits you too, so it's efficient and trading. The other one has haste, so basically you get to play a 1/1 that can immediately trade up with a 2 toughness creature or start pinging right away, which could be really important against token decks. Yeah. Well, is Hissing Guanar a pinger? Hissing the Guanar, I would not classify it as a pinger in the classic sense, right? Like, you have much less control over it. Even in a red-black sacrifice deck, you still need things to throw away for it. I find it as more of just it's a finisher for aggressive decks. The number of times I've drafted a 15 mana token spewing Hissing a Guanar double Trumpet Blast effect deck and just slam that on turn 4 with 5 tokens in play and attacked, and the opponent starts doing the math and realizing that there's virtually no sequence of blocks that they can take for the rest of the game that leaves them alive unless they get rid of that Iguanar is pretty powerful. Also super glad it got a reprint in in Ultimate Masters. It really needed one. Yeah, helps attacking to a huge board and still activating the Spectacle. Yeah, it synergizes with the black-red sacrifice deck. It synergizes with attacking with tokens. It hits a sweet spot of flexibility that, honestly, Barb Lightning did not. So I think we've said enough about that. I'm going to talk really quickly about Titanic Brawl. I think to the surprise of no one, can just better pounce. I know we had the version of it that was better with legendary creatures in Dominaria, but we don't have legendary creatures at common. At least not in the cube. I think there's 5 on Magic Online thanks to some Masters Edition release. But yeah, Titanic Brawl actually works with some of the creatures in the cube. It's just strictly better than Pounce in the cube. It's not the most exciting card. But I think that if you had a choice between, as the last 2 picks, Titanic Brawl or Pounce, you're always going to take Titanic Brawl. You would never take Pounce over Titanic Brawl. Just in case you get a +1/+1 counter, just in case you get, something like that. It's really nice with the travel preparation. If you have a travel preparation, suddenly Titanic Brawl looks really exciting. If you've got the Pacific Rim, the card is better superior in every way. If you've got the Sparring Construct that leaves a +1/+1 counter behind, if you're in black-green and you've got the Vampire that puts a +1/+1 counter on itself, not Falcon Wrath Noble, was like a Bloodflow Connoisseur. Again, it's got those little minor synergies. No, we're not losing Wild Instincts as a fight card. I think we keep that. We're losing Pounce. It's just a upgrade to Pounce, Fizzled. It's got minor synergies. They're corner casey. It's just good enough that it's going to matter. So I'm excited to just make that switch and send everybody a new fight card to replace a fight card that's basically the same. Forced to change my vote to a 4. All right, so we're gonna move on to an actual card, Wrecking Beast. So I'm a little hesitant about adding a bunch of hasty creatures to mono green because I feel like it's kind of a cool piece of red's identity, right? You get haste as evasion, you get to pressure an opponent aggressively. It makes red's 5 power creatures and 4 power creatures feel different than greens, right? Greens are sturdier, a little bit slower, but they're more difficult to deal with than a 5/3 with haste, right? That's gonna trade much easier, but if you're behind or if you don't have a good trade, it just amplifies the pressure. Wrecking Beast replacing Ivy Elemental, I think, is just great. You know, I wanted Ivy Elemental. I imagined it as after we talked about a fight card that cares about +1/+1 counters on creatures, we're going to take a +1/+1 counter creature out of green. But Ivy Elemental is the kind of card that I wanted to be flexible. Ramp deck, in theory, the theory was, hey, I can play it as a Grey Ogre, Hill Giant, Dirkwood Boars, like whatever size I need, I can get a body. And I can make my mana as efficient as possible, right? Because it's always, N-1. Whatever my mana is, I get N-1 sized creature. But as it turns out, Ivy Elemental just doesn't have evasion, doesn't have any... It doesn't live well alongside of the other efficient creatures in the cube, and Wrecking Beast does. It's a big fatty payoff. It tells you what you can do. A 7/7 is serious business. A 6/6 with haste is serious business. Oh, and it always has trample. It answers so many of the things that you want a ramp deck to have, or the top end curve of, the mid range red green deck. Because you can still build that. You can take all the ramp spell, the rampy spells, and then the bigger red creatures and the bigger green creatures, and the fight spells, and that works really well too. Again, just because red green tokens is kind of a theme doesn't mean you can't lean into the flexible cards and have that rampy deck. It lets Temur be kind of a thing. It lets Naya Beast be kind of a big thing because you can have the protective spells out of white work really well with a fatty or two. So everyone really likes it. I thought it was a really great suggestion. I forget which person actually suggested it in chat, so sorry, but thank you. I totally agree. Looking back on it, I think I misevaluated that card out of nowhere. That was my fault. Ending games from nowhere. Yeah, it gives a very reasonable threat out of green. If you're a control deck and you tap out to deal with whatever the big green ramp deck has, and they untap and play a 7th land, you're gonna be frowning and praying. And I like that tension. I like the idea of green having enough threats. It's part of why I've kept the elemental in for so long. Where is it? The Walker of the Grove, right? Like you can make a 5/5, make a 4/4 if you need it, but for the most part, playing a 7/7 that replaces itself is good. It's exactly what you want to be able to pressure a control deck with. You're getting 2 big creatures out of 1. Yeah, Walker of the Grove. I love the idea of being able to slam down a 7/7. Did you answer it? Okay, well now I've got a 4/4 still for you to deal with. That's something ramp decks need. They need that sturdiness. Skittering Crustacean. I can have a hexproof fatty. You've got to figure out a way to deal with that. Asking those questions out of the ramp deck gives the ramp deck what it needs to win. I'm going to talk quick about the 5 cards that I'm adding to each color pair. I don't think there's anything contentious here. There's a really cool one I want to talk about a little bit, but almost all of these are in the PTR, so none of these should be surprising. Lawmage's Binding is Arrest with Flash. Like, I don't know how to better describe it. Arrest is a good card. Flash removal is good. This is your peanut butter and chocolate put together. This is your pastrami on rye. I can't think of a different card that a blue white tempo deck would want. Like, great, I can leave a counter spell up, I can leave a protection spell up, I can leave a removal spell up, I can leave a bounce spell up, I can leave a flash creature up. So this is pushing anything out. I'm talking about the 5 cards that I'm adding from the multicolor section. So this is literally just our ad. Like, we just get to staple it on to the blue white cards and move on. Omni. Yeah. So there's no downside. We literally just get to add one of the best white-blue removal spells printed at common in years. Like, there wasn't a really good one in Return to Ravnica. So for red-black, I had a lot of trouble. Red-black was a struggle because honestly, the cards just aren't that great at common this time around. You know, like Wrecking Ball isn't super exciting, and that was, you know, the first Ravnica era of sets. We didn't get a version of that, you know, the second time around, and this time around it's 5 mana, kill a creature, scry 1. When from Alara, I've got, you know, red-black, just kill a creature, it can't be regenerated. Instant for 2 mana. Just the efficiency of the black-red cards were just not there. And we'll talk a little bit about Footlight Fiend with cards that didn't make it and kind of why I didn't go down that road. But in thinking about what can black-red do better than any other color, and it gets to play with the sacrifice effects a little bit better. It gets to play with trading resources better than any other. Like, okay, you trade your creature for mine, but I'm going to play a Gravedigger and just make you do it again. You can trade your removal spell for mine, but you know I'm okay with that because I'm just going to get a second wind out of it. I'm going to dig it out of the graveyard. I'm going to flash it. I'm going to flash it back. You know, you get to go use your resources well. And so when I looked over that in the context of having sacrifice effect cards, having caring about the graveyard, you know, those are kind of the two things that red-black gets the best of. And Cathari Bomber was a card that was in the cube years ago, and I came back to just because now we have more payoffs for sacrificing it. You get to hit your opponent, let the trigger go on the stack, sacrifice it to your connoisseur, put a +1/+1 counter on something, and still get your goblin tokens. It actually works well because it's a damage trigger that goes on the stack, not a replacement trigger for dealing damage. You know, like some of the older Ophidian cards. So this, you know, this hits a sweet spot. It got a reprint in Masters 2017, I think. So super easy to find in foil. It's not like some of the other Alara cards, which can be a pain to track down. I try not to go too far back in time to add cards all the time. But yeah, I just, you know, I like this. I think it, if you see this in red-black in a draft, I think it tells you a little bit more about what red-black should do, which is, oh, you know, I should be attacking every turn. I should be okay trading resources. I should care about my graveyard. I should care about tokens. I should care about sacrifice outlets. It kind of hints at the things that color does best and is in its wheelhouse. And I'm really happy that, you know, it exists because there's literally nothing else. Like Footlight Fiend was the backup until I dug through everything and remembered this card existed, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is it. Anybody have any thoughts to add to that or a contradiction? Like, that's not what red-black's about. Like, you know, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Isn't there a risk that this card could be like a slightly feel bad if you're behind? I mean, if there are blockers in the area, you just get a 2/2.
Yep. It's almost like it encourages you to use your burn spell on a creature and then attack. Weird.
Burn spells are for face.
The Unearth has haste, which is great because it makes your opponent think about keeping blockers up later in the game, which is when you need them to think about keeping blockers up. Red-black is obviously the most aggressive pair, and it has some of the most aggressive creatures. You know, it's got a 3/1 trample or 3/1 with haste. It's got you know, the kinds of aggressive trait. You know, I'm attacking you with Phyrexian Ghoul and 4 tokens. What are your blocks? You know, it's meant to, you know, it works best when it's putting pressure on the opponent. If you're behind, it's going to suffer the most. But if you're ahead, it just stays ahead. And you know, not every aggro deck should feel exactly the same. And I'm okay with having some aggro decks be better when they're putting pressure on and being worse when they're behind than others, just because that's how the color pairs work. Like, I'm not going to balance it perfectly. But I think this hits that sweet spot of when you're behind, yeah, it's not going to get you back in. When you're ahead, it keeps the pressure on your opponent to block correctly answer correctly, draw well. It does the kind of things you want to do when you're pressuring your opponent. Yeah, everybody seems to like it. Grixis Flyers is alive. Yeah. This is 2 mana with Warden of Evos Isle. You've hit the Seeker Grixis theme. Flyers. The Gruul card that I'm adding is Frenzied Ernix. Riot is a great flexible mechanic. A mana sink that ramp decks care about is nice because it always has trample. Again, they really did good job putting default evasion, default benefit on these Riot creatures. I think Wizards did a good job. What I like about it is that it totally obsoletes Rock's Brute, right? Like Rock's Brute is a 4/4 with nothing. This is always a 4/4 for 4 with trample if you want it. It's also one of the best tramplers because now it's a 3/3 with haste and trample when you want it. So when they leave up 1 token, or they leave up a bear, or they leave up a 1/4, now burning that creature and attacking makes sense. Now pinging that creature and attacking makes sense. It kind of fits into a nice, again, flexible wheelhouse that Riot offers, and not giving anything else up in green, I think, makes this card good. It's the top end for the red green kind of mid-rangey ramp decks. It's the mid-range, big size creature that you want. And I think it plays nice with some of the stuff that red green can do. Yeah, and if they have an 0/5 wall, if they just have if they have like a 6/6, that's something that can happen. Somebody levels up the only level up card I have left in the cube. Over in blue, it's the 2-drop. What it's called? Supposed to remember it. Halimar Wave Watch. Wow, it's been a long time since I had to say that. Halimar Wave Watch can become a 6/6. Rock's Ernix answers it. Like it gives you a way as a mid-range deck to, have ways of keeping the control decks. Think about it. Is there anything other than Eldrazi that this doesn't take out in a fight? If you have 6 mana up, I don't think so. Wrecking Beast can be a 7/7. So can some of the other big ramp. The Elemental we just talked about in green. And I'm super terrible with card names, but I remember what they do, which is I think what matters more. Walker of the Grove is a 7/7. So basically, the critical toughness if you're fighting this is 7. But yeah, Ernix, we're not giving up anything for Frenzied Ernix. We just get to add it and get the benefit of what a 4-drop with Riot can do. And sealed it, pulled its weight. Yeah, and that's something that I'm starting to keep in mind. Is I hear a lot of, hey, I'm doing a 4-player draft, or we're going to do a heads up sealed event. So cards that get to shine in different formats isn't a goal, but it's a nice to have. And Ernix is definitely the kind of card that shines in sealed when you're way less efficient and you need ways of breaking a stalemate. Are these multicolor cards replacing artifacts? Yes, they are. That was something in the PTR where I listed out some artifacts that we're cutting, and I'll touch on them shortly too. Basically next, right after this. Yeah, 409 is the sweet spot for the cube. I actually got a question on Twitter the other day. Somebody's like, is the cube really 409 cards? It seems awfully specific, and it is. And it's kind of an accident, but now it's a meme to keep it at 409. And if I can keep Omni scratching his head, I think I'm winning. There's multiple people typing. I've got the next card queued up. It's a prime number, yep. Is the other thing that this doesn't always beat. Yeah, I watched somebody get to drafted as like 9th pick. And I was like, that should not have happened. Somebody should have grabbed it as like a 7/7 or a 6/6 for 5 before that. But I don't think Lurking Automaton's going to be in the cube much longer anyway. So 420, 10 players, 42 card draft potential. Yeah, I think also if I did 420, like people might read into the jokes a little bit. So not going to worry about that. But moving on to 421, I can see 421. We'll see where we are when we get more feedback in the future. But in white black, adding the hey, welcome, glad you can hear me. The Imperious Oligarch is just Orzhov. Like, it hits the sweet spot of having vigilance. You get tax of opportunity. Replaces itself with a flying spirit. It's a 2-drop. It hits a nice wheelhouse of stuff that a white black deck can do. It feels right at home when you want to extort. You know, like, we're not pulling out the extort cards in white black, so you know you can turn 3 this and extort, or turn 4 this and extort. You know, it kind of hits what you want to do, and I don't see any reason it shouldn't be in the cube for as efficient as it is as the best afterlife common. I see we have an Usman join. It's been a long time since I got him to actually yell at me in person. It's always been just online. Doot. Nunny, you mean? Doot. Anybody have anything bad to say about Imperious Oligarch? I think it's a fine card, and among the white black cards, it's definitely one of the strongest to throw in. Multiple people are typing. It's great. I'm trying to fill some of the dead air while people type, which is why I'm talking a little bit more, but don't feel like I'm trying to discourage you from typing. And everybody stop typing. Okay, we're just going to move on. Growth Spiral. Growth Spiral is a cantrip. It's Explorer. It's an instant. It's currently a pretty valuable foil, I guess. Even normal. There's tons of them. It's not the most powerful card. You know, I will admit that up front and say, you know, it's not like I'm excited to first pick Growth Spiral, right? But it's not going to get taken by other blue decks. It tells you what the blue-green deck wants to do. It's a giant neon sign where if you see this in a pack and it's in the middle of pack 1 and you're flipping through the cards and you're like, what is this? You know, what is this card? Oh, okay, this is what blue-green wants to do. And so if you start picking blue cards, you start picking green cards, and then this table's around, you know, you can feel confident that you've been picking the right way, or you can adjust your pick strategy. You know, I'm not seeing this as necessarily like always like a turn 2 play. I think it's one of those cards where if you have a counter spell, you have a bounce spell, and you don't need to use it, you can still get some value out of the mana you left up. And that's what I like about it, is it's not meant to be the lead the way in and always be the thing that you play on too, but it's really meant to be part of that flexible suite of instant speed things that you want to be doing in a blue-green deck. Are you concerned that the signpost cards will conflict with current archetypes in the cube? No, because I'm choosing signposts that reinforce the archetypes in the cube. Blue-green is the ramp colors. It is meant to be the color pair that you want to be able to ramp a growth with on turn 2, that you want to be able to play a fatty out of. You know, you're going to use your bounce spell to buy time for your bigger, stronger, tougher, better creatures to come online. You're going to use your bounce spell to get rid of a token because it's, you know, it serves as a removal spell, and then you're going to trump whatever 2/2 or 3/3 that your opponent still has in play. That's what that color pair does, and adding in stuff like Skittering Crustacean, adding in stuff like Wrecking Beast is meant to shape that color pair and reinforce what it does. Are you concerned that Omni is going to point to the need for Simic Growth Chamber to make this more powerful when you're on your podcast? No, because we don't need bounce lands. We have more than enough ways to generate mana advantage, mana fixing, and ramping, especially if you're in green. You know, bounce spells are not necessary to make that archetype work by any stretch. And you're not going to see it in most of the, you know, necessarily in every draft anyway. So, you know, relying on one land to help define a color pair, I think, is weaker than a redundant series of similar effects concentrated in those colors that let you do that in most drafts. Yeah, UG cards have looked like tempo cards, which is always awkward. Yeah, and that's kind of been the core of the feedback, is switching and going, you know, what are things that they want to do on turns 2 and 3, what are things they want to do on turns 5 and 6, and finding cards that kind of can maybe fit both of those roles. You know, Skitter Incrustation, fine on turn 3. You know, you hit 7 mana, now you're in business, and it gives you that range of things to do. It is nice with Karus. Yeah, I played Commander before. Some of the cards we're going to cut, I'm just going to go through them really quick. So Eager Construct is meh. You know, it's always a filler card. It's a bear. Everybody gets to scry. You're never excited to play it, and if you're playing it in an aggro deck, something's probably gone a little wrong. There's enough 2-drops and 1-drops, thanks to a lot of the master sets, to fulfill aggro deck needs to curve out. We just don't need this anymore. And we cut the one that when it dies, everybody draws a card, which was just worse in a lot of ways. Yeah, press F to pay respects. This is that phase of the update I want to talk about. Ocean Soldier is actually a pet card of mine. I've always really liked it for defensive decks. I've always really liked it with equipment. Like, turn 3 Ocean Soldier, turn 4 suited up with Volshock Morningstar is surprisingly tough for a lot of decks to deal with. Especially black decks, because a lot of the best removal spells have the old non-black, non-artifact rider. People forget that. And so they go to remove it and they're like, oh, I actually need a very different spell to kill this. The Regenerate Golem is better. It is. And that's why Regenerate Golem got to stay. Not because I had it altered into Michelangelo's David by Eric Klug, but because Ocean Soldier is just doesn't need to be here anymore. We've got enough 1/4s in blue that true control decks, you know, need it. Don't, you know, have a more valuable 3-drop to play. That's a 1/4. And more valuable options I could add to the cube if we really need more. And in black, you've got Death Touchers, which serve very similar roles, but synergize with Graveyard Recursion. And, you know, you just don't want a 1/4 for 3 vanilla anymore. Yeah, the F. I love the F emoji. So similarly for Slash Panther, you know, there's a time I remember when this card came out that people thought it was gonna be like the next big thing in Vintage, and maybe it saw play and it was like a $10 foil and everyone was really excited about it. But we've gotten a lot more haste creatures since then. You know, paying 4 mana and 2 life for 4/2 with haste. It killed Jace. Yes, it very conditionally attacked for 4 when you needed it to. You know, we've added a lot more haste creature options and a lot more valuable things to do with haste. You know, Frenzied Airnix is very similar sized card and has way more upside than this. It's just outclassed, and I think that that's the best way to put it. Yeah, WMC Duff just said that. You know, very few people are drafting this for 4, or drafting this for and just slamming it into a random deck that doesn't have red. So effectively, it's supposed to read as a 4 mana card, but really a lot of people read it as a 5 mana red card, just because it was more, you didn't want to pay the 2 life for it, and that makes sense. It's time to go. Looking at what this update will cost me in foils in Europe. There's 0 foil mint, Skewer the Critics. Yeah, it's Skewer the Critics is something else. I think I'm gonna have to post about that to everyone. But we'll cross that bridge later. Lurking Automaton. Lurking Automaton. I had a lot of fun with this card. I've laughed at it a lot. I love the little nods to humor that I keep in the cube, because it speaks to, I think, a better approach to Magic than just strictly always looking for the most valuable cards or looking for the most powerful cards. Lurking Automaton was the fun kind of card where when somebody picked it up as 7 or 8, which I've seen and people would do, you look at the people that were passing to that player going, really? That happened? You let them get to an 8? Best cube tutor deck card. Yeah, the bots just never take it, and you get it as like a, becomes like a 10/10 for 5 mana. And there's no real artifact destruction, so you really do need specific spells to deal with it. It's a really durable creature. But the biggest problem was actually the headache of how many cards did I draft? That question came up way more often than I thought it would. And I think it's just because people aren't expecting to have to track that until they get past it. And so count the cards that's left, but sometimes are we drafting 14 cards or 15 cards? Are we drafting 11? How many were in the pack? How many do you have? It honestly was a bit of a mid-draft distraction, and I don't say that lightly, but it's just I've repeatedly run into it, and I can't imagine other people haven't repeatedly run into it as well. And so it's not enough to just cut it, but people weren't excited about the card, people weren't expecting the card, people were annoyed by the card, it was distracting, it was fun, but it wasn't the kind of fun that makes you giggle like Carnivorous Death Parrot, right? Like, it's efficient enough that people get it, it's fun enough, people are fine playing with it, and it's good for a laugh, but it's not obnoxiously annoying you in the middle of everything. And it can't get as big as Stibs talked about. Yeah. Carnivorous Death Parrot, very very different kind of card. I like that. I like it more than as a fun kind of card. Go to Jail is another kind of quasi fun kind of card. Rolling some dice is not necessarily the best way to manage your removal, but it's super efficient and statistically is a fine removal spell. So, yeah, Lurking Automaton, farewell. I'm going to go press F and pay my respects. And the last card is, and this was also in the PTR, is Blazing Torch. Blazing Torch is meh. It's a 2-mana shock that requires you to tap a creature. So, it's got that going for it. Vampires and zombies, there's a little bit more in the cube than there were, I'll admit, especially zombie tokens, but the evasion was pretty marginal. You weren't relying on it. It was mostly of opportunity in a deck that somebody threw Blazing Torch in because they ended up short on removal spells. Sideboarded a lot of the time. It just wasn't the kind of card where if you were playing it, you felt like something went wrong with your draft. And so in my mind, adding more powerful cards where if it's a multicolor card and you're not going to play it anyway, okay, whatever. But if it is a multicolor card for your deck that you get late, or another more powerful monocolor card that you get late that you can reasonably sideboard and has a little bit more power than Blazing Torch, it's fine. I miss it because I had a lot of fun with Eric Klug's Zombie Cube, where this card was an absolute monster. Basically, it said equip creatures unblockable for 1 mana. Oh, and it can tap and probably kill the best zombie that somebody played. So it was a really nice, there are places where this card gets to shine and have a lot of fun, but it wasn't in the Pauper Cube anymore. So let me pay my respects. F. I'll see if Eric has an updated list. I know he had one a while ago. I think he took it apart and stopped updating it. But it was a ton of fun. And there's definitely more zombie cards now thanks to Amonkhet in every core set. Just about every set seems to add more zombies that you may want to consider, which is great. It was definitely like a zombies versus non-zombies theme. There were soldiers and there were clerics and they could do stuff against the zombies, and it was very thematic and fun. And I had a blast playing it. Red zombies. Yeah, so moving on, Savage Smash is replacing Pit Fight. Pit Fight is an instant. It's a hybrid card. It definitely plays very differently than Savage Smash. This is not a swap because Savage Smash is a clear upgrade. It's a swap because I believe it's going to play better for red-green decks. What are the two things red-green can do? Tokens and, mid-rangey creatures. Some of the best fight spells are the ones that pump the creature before fighting, because now a 1/1 token can actually take out a 2/2. Now your 2/2 can take out a 3/3. It lets you use your fight spell to do what you want to do, which is gain value and trade up. And I think the downside of losing an instant speed, red fight spell for you know, when you're splashing, when you have red black and you have a death touch creature, maybe, I think is mitigated by the fact that Savage Smash is going to be more playable than Pit Fight was. I just think more people that are in those colors are going to play Savage Smash over Pit Fight if given a chance. Yeah, Pit Fight. I mean, Pit Fight was Pounce, instant speed deal. You know, instant speed fight. What are the mana symbols under the cards? This is the new flavor of the. I used to use a scoring system where people could vote 1 to 5 on cards that we were discussing, and instead of going to a third-party website and kind of flipping in and out and taking time to set it up, I just realized I could add the mana symbols, and people could just vote on the fly, and that way you can just vote 1 to 5 using the mana symbols, which are easy to read and flavorful for Magic. Because I think there's like generic blues buried in the emojis, but they're much easier to find when I added them. Yeah, you never really cast it for red. Yeah, you know, I think Savage Smash is just going to play better. Speaking of cards that will play better, Final Payment. Boy, is Final Payment an interesting card to evaluate. So 5 life and 2 mana to kill something is pretty steep. You know, I'd rather pay 5 life and 3 mana for Ashes to Ashes to kill 2 things. But Final Payment is white-black, so you get to live in the color that makes a bunch of tokens, and black has token makers now too, so you've got 2/2 zombies, you've got 1/1 soldiers, you know, 1/1 spirits. You probably don't want to sacrifice a spirit, but you would if it kills like a 5/5 or a 6/6. Or I guess a 5, you know, something big. But it also has more enchantments. White has the most enchantments in the cube because of all of the enchantment removal. So if you have something like you know, something small lockdown that you're not worried about anymore, you can unlock it and use that old removal spell to kill a bigger creature or something that you actually need to deal with that you can't otherwise, and you don't have to give up the resources you know a creature you have to do it. Somebody spelled out yes, but the heart ended up in between. That's unfortunate. But yeah, this replaces Harsh Sustenance, which was, I think, a conditionally stronger card. You know, having 6 tokens in play, killing their big thing, and gaining 6 life was huge game. But Final Payment hits that instant speed, hits what you want to do. I think it's just going to end up in more decks because it's a generically stronger card than Harsh Sustenance was. And that's that. Fixed it. Yes, we spelled out yes. I'm waiting for somebody to put F just because they want to pay respects for some reason. So next card I want to talk about, unless it, you know, I don't think anybody wants to add anything. Everybody knows how good Final Payment is. F for you to sack the creatures. Is Applied Biomancy. Applied Biomancy, what a beating. You know, you get to bounce something. I think it originally read as put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, which would have been, I think, just really good. I'm not sure why it wasn't a strict choice of put a +1/+1 counter on creature or bounce something, because I think that hard choice, especially in a set where you care about putting +1/+1 counters on things, and a set that has Titanic Smash, that would be really cool. But basically, it's a bounce spell that other blue decks can't take. It can be a 2-for-1. You know, it doesn't read exactly like the blue-black. You know, target creature gets -3, -0. Another gets -0, -3. But it's pretty close. Bouncing a token and pumping a creature that takes it upsizes it out of a trade. Agony Warp, yeah, takes it out of a trade. I think gives this one 2-for-1 potential. It just fits. This is replacing Frilled Oculus, so a 1/3 for 2 for blocking kind of isn't hitting what I want to do anymore. It's just not the kind of efficiency. Really, the critical toughness is 4. You want 4 toughness because then you can safely block a 1/1 if the opponent has a Trumpet Blast effect. And having to put mana into it, you know, the Root Wall effect to pump it up, you know, is a little bit tougher. Having a permanent boost is something that I think is better. But at 2 mana, you're almost always going to play Rampant Growth. You're almost always going to play a counter spell or a card draw spell. That's not what you want to be doing on turn 2, is playing Frilled Oculus in the ramp deck. You want to be getting to 4 mana as fast as possible. So the idea of Frilled Oculus never quite lived up to what I wanted it to do. And I think Applied Biomancy is exactly something most ramp and blue-green decks want to do instead. Yeah, people are typing. Prep people had the only once each turn. Yeah, it's mental math. You can only activate it once, or if somebody activates it, if they're blocking or attacking, and then you burn it in response, it's a field bad. It never really played the way I wanted it to, but I didn't really have good alternatives in blue-green. It was the best fit for what I wanted to do, but it wasn't the best play that the cube could have until now. Is how I would put it. Yeah, Simic was thin. Same problem with with Rakdos a little bit. Same problem with Gruul a little bit. Some of the colors, Boros, some of the colors just are thinner in terms of cards that feel as powerful as the other multicolored cards at the same rarity. Blue-black is a joke. Like, I could probably play 8 blue-black cards in my cube, and they would all feel like a beating. I can't do that with any of the other colors, but especially blue, green, white, red. Some of the colors just don't get the same kind of tools. Scuttlegator. We'll talk about Scuttlegator a little bit later. So the last card I want to talk about, and this is one where I need some feedback on. Once people catch up on typing, I'll let them do that. Yeah, later, Gator. Is Aeromunculus. I'm honestly really, really on the fence about this card, and right now I'm looking at not adding it. Somebody voted 5. Another person voted 5. Let the voting begin. So the reason I'm on the fence about this is I'm struggling for the 3 mana slot for blue green, because the obvious card it could replace would be Beetleform Mage, right? Or something like the Flash Quaddle that has Death Touch, but that's kind of a removal spell, or Snake Form, which is again a removal spell. Aeromunculus is 2/3 flying for 3, which is fine, and paying 4 mana to make it a 3/4 flying is also fine. It's hard Simic. So it definitely is going to hit blue-green decks. It's not so powerful you want to splash it into a blue deck, so it doesn't tempt you to take it over something that's a little more splashable or a definite 2-for-1. It's a permanent boost, which is something that I think speaks to a ramp deck better. Get to play something early in a sequence, get a payoff for it, a little bit later. Feels like a good story for ramp decks. It would be Beetleform Mage is the card that would be the obvious replacement for it. I think giving blue-green removal spells with Wind Quaddle and Snake Form is important. I think every color pair should have some removal spells that basically it gets to play with and plays best with. Yeah, if you dodge bolt once, you never have to worry about it again. That's what I like about it. What I don't like about it is that it doesn't really put a lot of pressure on the opponent. A 3/4 flyer is pressure, don't get me wrong, but 4 damage in the air really is a big step up from 3, just as 3 is a big step up from 2. Yeah. Flying 3 toughness stops a bunch of 2-powered attackers. Yeah, and again, that's why this is so hard. Is Aeromunculus hits that sweet spot that I like to see for 3 mana. For a multicolored card, for having a payoff for ramp, it checks off all my boxes. But I also feel Beetleform Mage does, it hits very similar sort of tones too. And it's just a little bit more powerful on the offense, a little bit more powerful on the defense, gets to trade with just a couple more kinds of cards, which can matter. And the investment of 2 mana is not so bad. I think it's a good card. It gets flying, when you pay for it. So that's kind of where I'm at. Is I'm really kind of split, and I'm not confident either way because honestly, both cards serve very similar purposes, roles, and work that way. I'm leaning towards Beetle Form Mage just because I'd rather not necessarily change everything about Simic. I can always add Aeromunculus later. Conversely, I can always add Beetle Form Mage back later. But I'd rather not make a change if I'm not so confident that it's going to make the play experience better. That's kind of where I'm sitting. Aeromunculus, I think, is not way cuter. I like Beetle Form a little bit better. It feels like a superhero. Because it was the artist that did it was doing inking and superhero art, and so I actually have an artist proof of this where on the back it's a female version of Beetle Form Mage, and it literally looks like it could be a Venomverse character, just like a cool superhero or villain, I guess. Maybe it's a super villain. I think I posted a picture of it once before. I'll put it into Card Bling later on. I'm not going to get it from my desk now, of course. But yeah, I kind of want to turn a little bit like somebody talk me into one or the other, because otherwise I'm gonna go to the deep tank on this and figure it out. Yeah, Warden Vivos Isle is an edge case. It discounts Aeromunculus, but do you really care if it's discounted that much? The payoff is at 4 mana anyway, and you don't get a discount on that, so it's a little marginal. But being able to Aeromunculus and leave up a bounce spell is pretty good for turn 4 too. There's a synergy this thing that makes Adapt better. Well, we're adding Titanic Brawl. So that's one kind of synergy, but it's really not. There isn't a lot of cards that care about +1/+1 counters in the cube. It's really, does the permanent 3/4 mode outweigh the conditional 4/4 mode? Yeah, really like Aeromunculus. Adapt is fire and forget it. Yep. It's good. It's good for memory. You don't have to think about using it. You don't have to think about using it only once. It's a trap for new players. Yeah. Can we have both? Well, that's a great question. Can we have both? So the other the other cards in blue green that we could replace are Snake Form, Winged Quaddle, and Coiling Oracle. Let's go ahead and throw Coiling Oracle right out. We're not replacing Coiling Oracle. That card's great. Winged Quaddle was the card that I came to that would make the most sense to replace. I'll go ahead and add that here. Flash, Death Touch, Flying. Basically, it's a 3-mana removal spell. Requires, blue-green. I think that's fine. I think it's nice to have a hard removal spell. I think it's great. The fact that it's flash means that you don't have to, makes your opponent play around it. It deals with flyers, which is really important for ramp decks. Like, if I'm going to beat you down with a 7/7, I can't take 5 hits from a 3/2 flyer. So I'm hesitant to swap Winged Quaddle and Snake Form, even though it's a hybrid card. It cantrips. So basically, an opponent attacking in or an opponent blocking, you get to destroy whatever the creature is and draw a card, which just feels awesome. It's close to a 2-for-1 as you can get outside of being a literal 2-for-1. So again, those are the other options, and I'm not confident that either of those are a card I'd want another flyer over. What's that Eldrazi flyer? It's a mono blue card. It makes the 1/1 token. What is it called? Eldrazi Sky Spawner. Yeah, it's that's just a mono blue card that gives you 3 power in blue for 3 mana. Gives you a ramp card, so it's the kind of card that you're happy to take in a blue green ramp deck. Like, great, I get a flyer and I get a 1-time ramp. It makes a token. It's the best version of the 3-drop that makes a 1/1 token that they printed in the color that's supposed to have the worst of those options. And Wretched Griff. Yeah, Wretched Griff draws a card. You could sacrifice something for it, draw a card. Feels good. Big game. So again, I just don't see anything else to replace it with. The other alternative would be to not add Growth Spiral, and then we could just keep Beetleform Mage and add Aeromunculus. But I really, really like Growth Spiral, and I think it's an important kind of instant speed card that deck should have. You know, the ability to represent a trick, the ability to gain value out of mana, the redundancy of having something on turn 2 that could ramp them. It really hits a lot of things that the blue-green decks, you know, want to have on turn 2 or want to have around in the early game. And at worst, it just cycles in the late game. Like, that is the worst mode. It just cycles, and that's not the worst thing to say. But when you want to have enough 2-drops in a ramp deck, Growth Spiral is going to look way better. You know, Coiling Oracle is going to look way better than adding another, you know, 3-mana flyer-ish creature. Vagromance is typing, and Usman went away. Bye, Usman. Oh no, he's back. Yeah. So tell me about Aeromunculus more. In the comments. Arrow, Growth Spiral, Beetleform. Yeah, you are a monster, Fizzled. I have to really watch your feedback because you're just a monster. So quickly, I want to talk about some of the cards that didn't make it and why, because they're good cards and I'm excited by them, but they're just not hitting the needs of the cube. But they might be good for your cube or your take on the cube, or a flavor of the common cube that you're looking to change the archetypes on with. Impassioned Orator. So I used to have all the Soul Warden effects in the cube, and you could gain a ton of life and then die because your creatures didn't do anything. But they weren't bears. This is a bear that just lets you gain life for being in a token deck in white. I don't think we need life gain cards, and I don't think they're that great for the cube. But of the ways to have a bunch of life gain, putting it on a bear just feels way better than putting it on a 1/1. Because it's a better threat, it's a better blocker, it's better with equipment. It kind of hits a spot. I wish it could make the cube. I'd love to see a cube where life gain matters and the Impassioned Orator, Syndic of Tithes kind of cards get to live. It's just not this cube. Aeromunculus and Beetle should go up for a wider vote, like Dinrova Horror. Yeah, I think that's probably what I'm going to come down to, because I honestly, you know, I'm at a point where I might flip a coin for it. Yeah, Suture Priest is, I think, probably the closest that what I would put in the cube, and I've actually thought about going back to it and adding it to the cube just because of the life loss. It now turns making tokens into a threat instead of just a benefit, and it's a little bit more. It's an offensive flavor of the Soul Warden thing. But yeah, you know, curving a Soul Warden into Suture Priest into Syndic of Tithes into make 2 creatures drain you for I gain 4 or 5 life, you lose 3. Like, it just adds up really quick. Just Curse Portal. Wouldn't we rather just have Cloud Shift? Right, like if we think the white blue secret theme, sub theme, whatever you want to call it, just like red green has its theme of tokens, but it has the sub theme of being the classic mid range. The blink is definitely like a sub theme in blue white. You can definitely draft, especially in Esper, a really nasty deck that just wants to flicker half of its creatures, and you just gain a ton of value that way. You know, it's the archetypical Muldrifter cube deck, right? Like, I'm gonna first pick Muldrifter, and then pick things that make Muldrifter better, or things that can replace Muldrifter with those effects, and you end up in Esper pretty quick. Just Curse Portal is cool because it gives first strike, and it encourages you to use it, you know, in a defensive thing. not being able to get first strike on attacks feels really bad, which is why, I didn't, it's not an offensive card. It doesn't feel like an offensive token card, tempo card. So I shied away from it, but I really like the idea of blink effects, and Jiskar's Portal is a really cool, interesting wrinkle on it because of the ability to give first strike. It lets you attack and then use a card defensively, get a second. Imagine using Jiskar's Portal on core, the 2/3 Rebel core with fading. My goodness, I'm really terrible with card names. What is it called? Aven Riftwatcher. Aven Riftwatcher. Imagine using Jiskar's Portal on that. It's going to leave play. I'm going to gain 2 life. It's going to come back into play. I'm going to gain 2 life, and then I'm going to block your creature and kill it with my first strike, and reset my vanishing counters. So that's like the best case scenario, right? Like that's not enough for me to add to the cube, but that's the kind of play sequence that really delights some players, and some players kind of set up with momentary blink and some of the other ways to bounce stuff. And honestly, I draft even Riftwatcher pretty high just because it's generally really good value. Flickering Walker of the Grove. That would be pretty unreal in a ramp deck. Maul Splicer. That's another nasty one to flicker. So there are payoffs in the cube, but it's not, it's always best case scenario. What's the average case scenario for Jiskar's Portal? You probably flicker a 2/2 and maybe kill their creature with it, and they have to be attacking with a red chronic creature for you to block with. Flicker Wall of Roots. That's why there's flicker effects in the cube, but it's not a focus. It's because it's good incidental, but it's really difficult to build an entire deck that just says let's flicker everything. So, but if you do it, boy, do I have a card for you. Baggermance is typing. Don't you flicker before? Oh, right, before the combat damage. Yeah. You flicker after declare attackers, and then you declare what you flickered as a blocker. Here's another card I originally had on my passive cards to add, and then based on some cool discussions in the Discord, I took it out. Sage's Row Savant. So I love Scry 2. I love Scrying 2 on the second turn. I love blue decks that cast a creature on the second turn instead of sitting there and either doing nothing or having a counterspell for something irrelevant because you feel like you have to use it. If it was a 2/2, I think we'd be in business. But 2/1 is just really thin, and we already have Omen Speaker, which is much sturdier. We have other, other card draw effects. Sage's Row Savant's great. I think it's a fine card, but it's not playing out as strongly as I thought it might in, the Ravnica Allegiance environment. And I think in a world where we've got a ton of tokens running around and a ton of one power disposable things that are fine attacking into Sage's Row Savant, would you pay 2 mana? Would you pay 2 mana to destroy a 1/1 token, Scry 2? I'm not sure. So. That's kind of where I settled with Sage's Row Savant. But I like the card. I really wanted to throw it in and do a nice little nod to flicker decks and kind of the other things that people like to do for value. Because it fits right at home. Another Skittle Eel. that is not a card. Skitter Eel, however, is a card. So I looked at this one because, again, it reads very similar to the, play a creature, get a payoff, and ramp. But this one just doesn't, I don't think it would play out the way I imagine it would. Hill Giant is a fine card, but at 4 mana, it's a little weak on the defense for 4 mana. Adapt 2 for 3 mana is strong. So you get a 5/5 for 7 mana. So that's a lot of investment, but it's a little slow. Doesn't have keywords. It doesn't have evasion. It's not defensive. It doesn't give itself hexproof or trample or flying. If it gave itself some other benefit other than just 2 power and 2 toughness, I think it'd be much closer to finding its way in. But this was the one of the strongest adapt creatures I could find at common, and it just doesn't seem like it would play out the way we would want it to. Crab Tribal, at this point, I think Adapt and Monstrosity is Crab Tribal. You just play crabby things, and they get better the more lands you have. I think they're patrolling the beach and kind of scuttling around and being really mean. But more seriously, I think Skitter Eel speaks to the quality of play design at Wizards, right? It'd be really easy for this card to be to add like flying or to add hexproof, and be just as efficient. But I think they're doing a really great job testing out limited. Like, this card's powerful enough that I probably want to play it if I'm Simic in draft. It's powerful enough that it feels like it's a good adapt card, but it's not overwhelming. Like, I don't feel like, if I'm not getting the payoff mode, all is lost. Or if I pass this in a draft over a removal spell, all is lost. They've really dialed in the power level for the monocolored cards in this set. The payoffs are in multicolor, and I'm just not seeing this card stand out in the cube as a monocolor card. Click, 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 dot deck. Yeah. Another card that I really liked and thought about adding, but then, decided that we don't need to, let's not reinvent wheels every 6 months when there's a new 3-mana bounce spell. Arrester's Admonition. So this is basically Drag Under plus. To remind you what Drag Under is, this was in the cube. It's a sorcery. It's basically Repulse, but it's a sorcery. It's fair. Like, hey, you get to replace yourself, but you've got to spend your turn to do it. So the Arrester's Admonition gives you the option to do it as an instant, but gives you the benefit where if you cast it as Drag Under, you draw a card. It feels fair, but blue doesn't need a lot of help. The bounce spells are good, the tempo is good, the card selection and card drawing is good. I haven't heard people complain that blue is weak and control decks can't win, and blue decks don't have what they need. So the current bounce spell, if you're curious, and I am too because I remember looking it up like 5 times, is Depths of Desire. And Depths of Desire is an instant speed bounce spell, which is good, and it gives you a treasure token. So this is the bounce spell where if you're thinking about blue-green, thinking about ramp decks, thinking about the long game, Depths of Desire kind of opens up some cool play sequences. Like, hey, now my splashable card is a little more splashable if I've got Depths of Desire in my deck. Now my ramp deck has something on turn 3 where if I reset you, it's also probably accelerating me towards my 6-drop, which is what I really want to do, or my hexproof creature. So I can stabilize and basically, anchor against your 3/3 or 4/4 you want to beat me down with. And I think the play sequence of being always an instant, is just the same as Arrester's Admonition, but the characteristic of adding a treasure token is not as good as drawing a card in most cases. But I think that this just plays a little bit better. And especially if somebody's doing the nonsense, I want to play 4 colors kind of deck, like these cards, Prophetic Prism, and you start piling up some of these ways of getting just a little bit of mana fixing, I think is good. I'd rather stick with where we came to. Let's keep playing it out. At worst, I can always go back and grab Arrester's Admonition or Drag Under or Repulse. Not happy. But I can always go back and add it later. I think Depths of Desire is still the right 3-mana bounce spell for now. What if I Death's my Wall Root to accelerate into an Eldrazi on my turn slightly earlier? Yep. Yeah, that's the kind of cool stuff I like to see. Like creative use of game mechanics, as I think Blizzard would put it. It's not a defect of the cube that there's kind of cool interactions and cool play sequences that players can discover or actually really good drafters will leverage. It's a feature, right? I got destroyed by a Sultai-colored, bounce deck. And, it's the Cavern Harpy with all the bounce spells, but it's got removal spells, and it functioned on 3 mana. Like, I could not overcome it, even though it was stuck on 3 mana for, several turns, just because the quality and value and play sequencing that the player had with it was so good. And that's the kind of cool stuff that exists in the cube. I think that's why, I would submit that's part of why, a lot of people like my cube is it's easy for newer players to understand, but it has a lot of wrinkles in it that let you do two different things, do cool things, and go deeper. And that's something that I appreciate. I might discourage making 4-color nonsense one of the best decks, but that's not the same as saying you can't end up with a 3-color nonsense deck and have a lot of fun and be successful with it. First time drafter with a 3-color control deck. How did that turn out for them, Cheery? I'm kind of curious. The Pauper Cube is a super hard draft experience, actually. I've gotten that feedback, but I think it's because the parity of power is so close. So many cards are good. And that's, again, where the difference between an experienced drafter who's just a little bit better at card evaluation, a little bit better at reading what's going on in the pack, a little bit better at identifying synergy. Seeing Sam Black draft my cube humbled me because he had a Bant deck that just smashed. And the fact that an experienced player gets the benefit of all their experience, but an inexperienced player still ends up with enough cards that they can fight well, is again a feature. That's not a defect of the cube. He went really far, came from Hearthstone, still learning how to value creatures, also got 4 duels in those colors. Yeah, he gets to, the mana fixing was there, the value was there, and did well. And that's okay, I'd rather players feel like they can do well or do well enough, even if it's not an optimal deck. I think that's an upside for the cube. Yeah. What's another card? Oh yeah. Undercity Scavengers. So Undercity Scavengers hits that wheelhouse of black sacrifice effects, and so I actually like this card a lot. Making a 5/5 for 4 mana and getting the Scry 2 definitely feels like a good black exploit effect. And this is exploit. Like you could have put this card on Tarkir, change Ogre to Orc, and it would have been a Tarkir card for sure. Exploit, Fate Reforged, whatever. This card, I don't think the cube needs it, but as an open question, do we need more sacrifice theme payoffs than we have? This is a question that I want to throw out there, and I hope we can kind of have a follow-up discussion on later. I'm not sure we need it. I haven't heard people say, man, I really wish I had more sacrifice of speed effects. Prefer them in instant speed. I do too, which is why I put in, Phyrexian Ghoul, which is classic. Blood Flow Connoisseur, which gives you a +5, +1/+1 counter, which is a permanent trade-off. It's repeatable. This is a one-time. It does, the Scry 2 is big. I think Scry 2 is the new cantrip. I think it reads like if they want to give you card selection that feels close to drawing your cards, Scry 2 seems to be where they've settled, because I've seen Scry 2 on so many cards over the past couple sets. But do we need those effects? Do we need to announce a little bit louder that black-red or black has this sacrifice theme in it? I'm not sure we do, which is why I'm there, but Undercity Scavenger looks really nice. It's the best exploit card we've seen, in quite a while. Doesn't lead to a repetitive play experience. I think that's important too. It's very easy to get caught up in the cool factor of looping effects, and it's part of why I don't have all of the black cards that are repeatable, bring stuff back from the graveyard. It leads to this weird sort of grindy floating above water until I just overcome you and you blank on enough draw steps, play sequences that don't feel good. I'd rather have a benefit. I'd rather have the advantage of not having to do mental math all the time, and I'd rather have the sequencing where you simply curve out and you feel like you're doing it right, because I'm going to play this 4-drop and I'm going to have a 5/5, and then I'm going to set up my next draw step and make sure I've got a great play for turn 5. That feels great in a deck. Carrion Feeder sack stuff that's going to die. Yeah, Yeah, just the instant speed dumps, I think, are just better for what we need in the cube. People are typing. I don't want to move on. I'm ready to move on because we've gone on an hour and a half, and I want to try to wrap this up really quick. Luis is typing. Yeah, I feel like there's probably both sacrifice creature type card. Yeah. Behind Slum Reaper. Yep. Yeah, and Slum Reaper fits the same kind of role but is more offensive. You know, you get to take out an opponent's creature, and if you've been doing your work making them trade away their smaller creatures, you get the payoff. It's good. So here's another card I thought about and decided to hold off on. Maybe you'll talk me into it, but Rampaging Redhorn is what a great little creature. I really like this creature. You know, a 4/4 with haste or a 5/5 for 5 are totally reasonable things in green. Green doesn't have a lot of haste creatures, even though haste is like, I think, secondary to green. Honestly, I'd have to go back and look at some of the recent design articles that have been out there from Wizards, but Riot is great. The reason I didn't go down this is because it's missing the one word that I think makes a world of difference, and it's the one word we had on the other two Riot creatures that mattered. Yeah, trample. Scry. Yeah, Scry 3. If Scry 3 was on this creature, yeah, I think we'd run enough. But trample matters. Lifecraft Cavalry is a flexible card. It gives you tokens or it gives you a big trampler. What are some of the other big? Ooh. Yeah, I messed up something on my side. Whoops. Yeah, you're gonna laugh when I get the video posted because my computer's not always cooperative. It's super great. But looking in green, some of the other options at 5 mana in green are, Pima Outrider, which is a nice 4/4. Actually, that's 4 mana. Yeah, that's why it's there. Lifecraft Cavalry. It's a 5/5. It's always a 5/5 for 5, or it makes a. Oh no, it's Lifecraft Cavalry does not make tokens. I'm sorry, it's the Revolt card. I've got it backwards. Yeah, but it's really easy to set up a 5/5 trample. Nessian Asp can block really well. Overgrown Armisar is a great card if you've got fight, if you've got other ways to beat in. As much as I like Rampaging Redhorn, I think the fact that it doesn't have that evasive quality outside of haste kind of puts it off of the alternatives at 5 mana in green. Is there a flying trample at common? Scrapple. Yeah, so I had Drakewing Krasis and Assault Zeppelin for a while, but the three power is just kind of small. Honestly, they felt more like tempo cards and not ramp payoffs. Rampage is not trample. Sorry. It's close. With Riot and Menace. Yeah, I wouldn't want to pay for 4 mana for a 2/2 with Haste Menace. I don't think I would want to pay for a 3/3, 4 mana for a 3/3 with Menace. I've got all the Ravnica stuff up. It's a red card, not Spike Wheel, Acrobat. Let's go back one. I'll find the name of the card. Scroll into it now. The red one. Gorklan Wrecker. Yeah, Gorklan Wrecker. I don't think I like any mode of that creature. A 2/2 haste menace for 4 mana feels a little small. 3/3 menace for 4 mana feels slow. It just doesn't seem to lend itself. I feel like it's either missing a point of power. If I had a 3/2 haste, for 4 mana with menace, that would be a little more exciting. If it had trample, and was a 3/3 and it was 5 mana instead, maybe, plus menace, maybe it's a little bit different at that point. I just have a hard time seeing that kind of fit in. Yeah, nobody seems to be crying foul about Rampaging Rendhorn, so happy with that decision. Here's a card that came out of the PTR update, Senate Griffin. I like generic flying scry stuff. It's a lot of fun. You know, three power flying for 4 mana is pretty much the base rate. It's flexible enough to go in mono white decks, blue decks, splash around. The double hybrid requirement does keep it from being super splashable, so it really does feel like a blue white card instead. But honestly, Cortosar needs more trample. Yeah, but Cortosar, is not a card I typically play, but I got a lot of feedback that is a stronger card and people really enjoy. So, Cortosar for life. Yeah. Yeah, Cortosar. What an addition from Masters 25. Like, people knocked that set because it wasn't the reprint set that Ultimate Masters was, and yeah, I'm not going to get into that discussion, but boy, did it have some cool cards for us to look at, and it was a lot of fun to finally get like a foil for Phyrexian Ghoul just in time for the Black Sacrifice theme, and Cortosar is a great little common. But if you don't like how Cortosar plays, I think Senate Griffin feels like a very similar role, and rather being a defensive, maybe slower creature, it's definitely lends itself to more of the blue-white kind of tempo flyers deck. Hey, I'm going to make a 4-mana threat, and I'm going to probably set up a better draw. Fizzled is typing. On this our Griffin mount. We never added Senate Griffin. It's there. It's not gone. Just go draft on Arena. I promise. You can fly the sky with your Griffin. Running monkeys. By the 4 drops in mono blue. Yeah. Yeah, it's just there's other cards that are good. And Fizzled is right. Like it's not meant to outclass those cards, but it's also just not the kind of blue-white card I think a lot of people want to play. So let's talk about Footlight Fiend really quick, because it's one of the last 2 cards that I want to touch on today. Footlight Fiend is a card I almost added just as a function of I can't find anything else in black-red. And Usman, I think, was one of the folks that chimed in, and he was like, that card's just not great. Please stop. Don't do that. Rethink your life. Go back to the drawing board. So I did. And that led me down the Cathari Bomber path, and I think a much more satisfying, exciting card. It wasn't so much that. Usman's going to explain himself. I may have added a little dramatic effect to what Usman said. Black aggro isn't a thing in your cube. It isn't. I was thinking about it in the context of being a card that you could throw in and easier to cast Goblin Artisan, which it is, but it works with the Black Sacrifice payoff effects, and is a really good defensive card against tokens because it can actually trade 1 mana for the 2 mana token makers. Oh, Usman. Yes, that is better. Wrecking Beast right now is what we've got queued up to replace Ivy Elemental. Yeah, everyone was very excited about that. There's a lot of joy to be had. But I agree. I think Rampaging Rendhorn is better than Ivy Elemental. But I think we've got a bigger, stronger, beastier, it's not Carnage Tyrant. What's the common? Colossal Dreadmaw. Yeah. Like, I was at a point where maybe I should just add Colossal Dreadmaw and be the meme, but Wrecking Beast is just better. But yeah, Footlight Fiend, I'm scrolling back to it for the people that are watching video later. Footlight Fiend, I really liked because it was the kind of card that you could throw into a deck that had a couple sacrifice outlets, or you could side in against a token deck, and it would pull its weight pretty well. I think it's one of those cards that would quietly find a home and be serviceable for black-red decks, but it wasn't exciting. It didn't tell you really what to do. It's definitely not aggressive enough. And so I went with Cathari Bomber instead and didn't cut any of the black-red removal. But it was a little bit closer. I do like that it's hybrid. I do like that it's, because it's easier to cast, it kind of slots itself into those kind of decks a little bit better. And the last card is everyone's favorite, Crab, Turtle, Crocodile. God, I love Simic creatures so much. Why aren't we adding Scuttlegator? You're talking about making blue-green so much better, giving the ramp deck things to do and having payoffs, and wasn't this just a huge giant payoff? And nobody's going to want to play a 6/6 defender for 6 and have to pay 8 mana to attack with it, and oh, I understand now. So the problem with Scuttlegator is, again, it comes down to the keywords, right? It's so close, and I really like Scuttlegator, and I really think it would be a great kind of card for the blue-green decks, and shout from the rooftops, like, you see that card in a draft, like unambiguously, how do you play Scuttlegator? You get to 8 mana. Like, that's it. Like, that's what it does, because it's not even efficient coming down as a defender. That's what blows me away. If this was 5 mana or 4 mana for a 6/6 defender, like, probably it's too good for draft and limited, I get that, but let's just go down that path. Suddenly the efficiency up front feels worth giving yourself a defender. And then fighting to get that payoff for 8 feels good. Now you can attack. But again, it doesn't have evasion. This literally just never kills a token deck. I just leave 2 1/1s back, and like you've gotta adapt it. Then you've got to have bounce spells. And then you've got to pray I also don't have a bounce spell of my own or a direct removal. Crab, Turtle, Crocodile. Yes, if I could make a soup from any creature in this set, it would be Scuttlegator for sure. I want little bits of fried Scuttlegator to eat, and Scuttlegator soup that I throw on the stovetop. So think about that. Oh, the sadness. I lived in Maryland for a number of years. Picked Maryland blue crabs by the bushel full at my house. Sorry if you're not into animals and eating them the way I am, but I eat all of the things. But yeah, so it checks a lot of the boxes, but without trample, without hexproof, like I'd much rather spend 7 mana and have a hexproof creature to show for it, or pay 6 mana to just cast a hexproof creature, than sit on a 6/6 that, doesn't stop flyers, can't attack through anything, and just dies to all the same removal spells that my fatties are already soft to. Yeah, Skullcrusher Mountain theme song. Yeah, that is a great theme song for Scuttlegator. Yeah, and so when Red Black gets a 5 mana instant speed removal spell, suddenly maybe getting to 8 mana and attacking with a 9/9 isn't necessarily an unreasonable assumption to make. And it does, if you get this down, it does do the 6/6 thing for 6 that Colossal Dreadmaw does in its sets. Well, it just negated everything that's 5 power or less. And it does anchor really well, but just in this cube where there's way better removal, way more efficient creatures, way more speed in the early game, I just don't see it working. It's just not what you want to be doing. And I think I'd rather get a Wrecking Beast or a Skittering Crustacean and have those maybe in my pool than pick up a Scuttlegator every single time. So, sorry little Scoot. Didn't see a single copy of the pre-release. Sad times. So anyway, so that's where I'm at. Those are the cards I want to talk about that are new in the set, the cards that I'm adding to the cube. That is the complete update that we talked about earlier. Except for Aeromunculus, which I think I'm going to go a little bit deeper on with everyone and throw it up into the main Pauper Cube chat and just get a little bit more feedback. I will make a decision. It's going to be based on what really looks like it's going to play best, but everything else is pretty solid. Everybody seemed excited about, and nobody really seemed to have a compelling case to change it. So this is the last call. If you want to add something, speak up, add it to chat. If you think we missed something, if you have, pretty critical feedback that you want to add to the cube, this is it. This is go time. That 4G44 tier thing, I have no idea what its name is. It's rampaging, if I can spell it. Rendhorn. Yeah. Man, I wish this had trample. Like, if this had trample, oh my goodness, like I would definitely jam it in. but just doesn't feel the same. All right, so we've got 10th District Veteran and Summary Judgment on the stack. Let's let Usman resolve. What did you want to share about Rampaging Renhorn, Usman? Okay, we'll let him catch up about Rampaging Renhorn later. 10th District Veteran. Whenever it attacks, untap another target creature you control. So it's kind of the reverse Hammer Skull. if you remember, likely better than some of the meter stuff at 4/5. So Armisar, Bowmasters. Yeah, so those cards seem mediocre, which is interesting because I've had really good experiences with those cards. Armisaur is a card your opponent really doesn't like to attack into. It works really well with all of Green's fight cards. It's a mid-range card that also works in token makers. Green has the benefit of fighting flyers really well. Bowmasters, Phantom, the Phantom, not the Phantom Spider, but the Dark Spider that makes a 2/4 spider, black spider if you kill it. Area Oofies, all those cards, yeah, Penumbra Spider, all those, Green gets to hose the flying strategies. Like if you're planning to win on the back of Warden of Evos Isle, Green is kind of a problem. Takes a little bit more work and just not having the answer for a flyer, Nessian Asp is 5 mana. It's a 4/5 reach with Monstrosity. Like plays into the ramp deck, but also is just a great 5-drop. Basically it comes down to those keywords. I like what Armisaur does. I like what Bowmasters does. Those abilities I think are more relevant than they might look at the surface based on the play experiences I've seen from the cube and gotten feedback on. But Rampaging Renhorn is just a keyword away from being comparable. I'd really, really wish it had Trample, instead of just being a hasty 4/4 or a 5/5. It's just missing that punch it needs, at least from where I sit. 10th District Veteran is Hammer Skull, but kind of reverse. You untap your creature. That's not the only time we've seen this effect. There's been other creatures that untap or tap other opponents' creatures when they attack. I'm just not sold on it. It doesn't do anything when it enters the battlefield. It's kind of small on the offense. 2/3 is definitely better on the defense. It's not vigilance. It can't untap itself, so you can't attack with it into like a bear and then untap itself to keep the bear from attacking into you. It just feels like a weird sort of aggro card. I'm not sure what kind of white deck I would draft that wants a 10th District Veteran. Oh yeah, it does have vigilance. Yeah, no, I can't read cards. Yeah, I'm still not seeing seeing a deck that I would want to draft it in. Good call, RTFC. But yeah, 2/3 for 2 is just not something I necessarily want to attack with. I'm not sure what I'm untapping with. What other creature am I untapping? That's really good on the defense. I'm not so sure. What would I be replacing with it? What do I want over it? Summary Judgment. Deal 3 damage to target type creature. If it's main phase, deal 5. So Summary Judgment is a really cool kind of twist on, the Gideon's, whatever, it's the Gideon spell, where it's deal 4 damage to attacking or blocking creature. So the key word on this card that I think players are overlooking is target tapped. So what this doesn't do is let you save your best attacker that gets blocked. It's worded so it's a good responsive spell for a small creature, but then you're paying 3 mana to kill something with 3 toughness. it works well with tappers. Now that is the benefit. If you've got, you know, like a Gideon's Lawkeeper, if you've got Stormscape Apprentice, cool, you can tap it and then main phase nuke it down. But now you're spending, you know, 3 mana to deal 5 damage to just a creature. You know, and you can't tap something else that turn, which is probably fine. But something like Gideon's Reproach would fit a little bit better into if you want to play like a white aggressive tempo strategy and punish opponents for blocking, or keep your best attacker. You know, hey, they played a spider and it's blocking my flyer. Well, great, I can kill the spider and attack again next turn. You know, I think the Reproach effect or the Pessimism effect is really where you want to be. The fact that this has a tap target creature rider just doesn't. I have difficulty seeing where it's going to perform better than other removal spells. Dark Revels. Sorcery. Return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to hand. Spectacle 2. So basically, Dark Revels, let's replace Thorn of the Black Rose. No, fizzled. Let's look at another card. So, oops. Let's look at Gravedigger. If I can type it right. So, same mana cost. Same base mana cost. Let's set Spectacle aside for a second. Same base mana cost. Get a creature back and put something onto the battlefield at the same time. You know, one of these is a little more proactive. One of these is a little more, nice with blink decks. It's has a little bit of synergy. You know, with you can loop it easier because there's other cards that get back a creature card from the graveyard. Gravedigger plays, I think, a little bit better than Dead Revels. Now the Spectacle cost is something to consider, but I believe we already have. I'm trying to think of the name of it. I want to say it's a Liliana's spell. Macabre Waltz. Thank you. Great call. It's already get 2 target creatures back, and your rider is discard a card. This is basically kind of Black's spin on Whispers, right? Like, I'm going to throw this land away that I don't need, or this tiny creature that's kind of irrelevant now, and get back 2 good creatures. I can do that with Macabre Waltz. I don't have to Spectacle it. Wander in Death, I think, is also a strong contender if you like. If you want an effect that gets 2 creature cards back for 1, because the cycling is great. Like, you can always throw it away if it's not relevant. Cycling definitely makes these somewhat conditional cards, a little bit more, I think, palatable to use because it adds that flexibility. But if I'm drafting a 4-mana reanimation spell and I'm choosing between Dead Revels and Gravedigger, I think even in an aggressive deck, I'm generally just going to take Gravedigger every time. I think I would have to have some sort of crazy, breakneck speed, nothing higher than 3 red-black deck to really make Dead Revels shine, and it's just not. I don't think that's going to happen in the cube. All right, that's. Anybody else? Any other cards we want to talk about quick? You want to pick my brain about? You want to make fun of me for? I'm waiting for Omni to drop in another obligatory Karoo just because he can. Or just ask about the actual Karoos because they're monocolored and fair, quote unquote. Luis and Running Monkeys are typing. Ill-Gotten Inheritance. Ooh, okay. Any opinions on Ill-Gotten Inheritance? So, Ill-Gotten Inheritance is super fun. It's a very complex card for common, which tells me that when Play Design was playing Limited Environment, they didn't feel like they had enough ways to make Spectacle turn on. That Rakdos was having just a little bit of trouble having ways to always make sure Spectacle could trigger. And their solution was to put a fairly complex card that requires upkeep memory at common. And make it an enchantment instead of, like, say, a creature which could sit out and attack and block and be removed pretty easily. It's an enchantment that drains life from an opponent, turns on Spectacle, and lets you, spend 6 mana to close out a game. So this is like the Rakdos kind of finisher. 1, 3, 4 in my victories, the pre-release. Yeah. I think that this is the kind of card that's going to read really weird and lead to just, it's kind of like a mini fireball. Except it's also draining life. Like, I don't think the play experience of Ill-Gotten Inheritance is good. There's very little interaction. There's very little interaction in Enchantment Destruction in the cube. There's a couple bounce spells, but you have to be in blue for those. I think Ill-Gotten Inheritance is a strong card just because it does some great unique things at common, and it's pretty complex and powerful. But without the Spectacle payoffs, and with more powerful enchantments already around, like, would you play Ill-Gotten Inheritance over Pestilence? There's a question I'll throw out there. Is Ill-Gotten Inheritance as strong as Pestilence? Like, what does it add if I'm in, the Pestilence kind of deck? Would I take Ill-Gotten Inheritance too? I'm not sure the answers to those are yes. So, I think encouraging creatures, I think encouraging attacking, I think encouraging interactive things rather than, well, I'm going to sit here and, drain you. I'm going to untap, drain you for a life, and then drain you for 4 more. Is a play sequence that's going to be super exciting for a lot of opponents. I want to keep my opponent's creatures away. Yeah, the white black enchantment control kind of deck, where Oligarch is going to feel really good. Where you're trading creatures, you're attacking in the air, you get Pestilence online, and you locked your opponent out of playing stuff. I'm just not sure Ill-Gotten Inheritance really adds much to the cube. Titanic Brawl. Replace a sorcery speed fight spell instead of pounce. So what sorcery speed fight spell do we want to replace? We've got Prey Upon, which is 1 mana. It's pretty good. Epic Confrontation, which pumps. That's pretty good. We've got Pounce. We've got Savage Punch, which is a conditional pump. That's pretty good. Go down a little bit more. Time to Feed. In view of the recent not being critical. Well, life gain not being critical is not the same as saying life gain doesn't have value. So let's pull up Time to Feed so everybody sees it. Time to Feed, 3 mana, fight, and then gain 3 life if that creature dies. So there is, talking about cube corner case. So there is corner cases where you can Time to Feed, choose a creature you're not fighting with, kill a different creature, and then attack. And if your opponent wants to trade their creature away, you gain 3 life too. I think most opponents would probably take that trade unless, situation's really dire or they're a burn deck and really can't afford to give opponent any life at all. But Time to Feed is one of those cards where when you use it out of the Simic deck against a burn deck or an aggressive deck, that 3 life feels really good. It's why I didn't cut the equipment. What is it? Where is it? Sylvok Lifestaff. Oh no, you do have to choose the creature that dies. Yeah, no. I'm not reading cards, and I'm also not a good player, which is a really bad combination for evaluating cards quickly on the fly. But it's why Sylvok Lifestaff is a really nice house for token decks, because you just gain a ton of additional life. And it's efficient enough at what it does. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'll go back and look at Time to Feed, and maybe keeping Pounce is correct, and just adding another instant speed fight is a little bit better. I forgot that Time to Feed required you to choose the actual creature that you're fighting to. That is a good point. You're probably right, which is why I have these discussions. Thank you. And that is, I think, all we have the time for. Unless anybody has any other things they really want to pick my brain about. I think that's it then. Thank you everyone for coming out. I really appreciate the time. You know, some of you have been here for 2 hours listening to me talk and make my mouth get really dry and be uncomfortable now. But the questions and feedback are part of why I do this. It's really, really great that I can get so much cool feedback, be challenged on my thoughts, force myself to evaluate if I've really considered all the benefits and features of a card or a change or an evaluation. Because honestly, you know, I'm not going to be perfect. You know, I'm not trying to be the perfect designer. You know, I would never submit that I could be a set designer or on the play design team at Wizards. It's a very much more powerful magicians, much more skillful players that do those things well. But it's been the community that's really kept the cube in such great shape and helped shape it into what it is. So this live interaction, the ability to share what I'm thinking, get challenged on that, get changes on that, and even reconsider, you know, changes at the last minute. Like, you know, yeah, Time to Feed. Actually, I haven't read that card in a very long time. It does not do what I thought it did, and it's not as good as I thought it was. Is good. So thank you. And with that, I think, yeah, have a great day. Dinrova Horror. Yeah, that's a great example of just when cards are close. You know, I think we're gonna Aeromunculus this one out. We'll Dinrova the set with Aeromunculus. You know, it's great for feedback. So thank you again. I will catch you soon.